Welcome to the Mesa City Council study session for November 13th, 19th. Wow, where's my brain this morning? How about 2025?
Good choice.
Councilmember Adams is participating by Zoom, and all other council members are present. Council item 1 is review the agenda we have for Monday, November 17th. Council, if you want to go through that, if there's any questions, let's do that.
Mayor, just to confirm, 6A is coming off, I believe.
Are you Mayor, council member, are you potentially looking at a previous version of the 6A was the Sun
maybe.
Devil Auto?
Yeah.
Right now, 6A is the capacity fees, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Yes, I was looking at a
Okay,
previous version.
yeah.
Whatever Sun Devil Auto is. I
Yeah,
guess.
Sun Devil Auto, I know was asked for a continuance, right, till
Yeah.
December 8th?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
So it's not Sun Devil.
Yeah, so if you've refreshed maybe try refreshing your,
I still get 6A as Sun Devil.
as Sun Devil Auto?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do as well.
Okay.
So IT needs to refresh it?
Okay, yeah, okay. Well,
Paper doesn't do this.
yeah.
Not even on the web.
The web's still.
Yeah, that will be the final that's posted today. I apologize. I have a preview version in my hand, so my apologies on that. But so the Sun Devil Auto has just asked for a continuance that they will for the December 8th agenda. So I apologize for any confusion there.
Do you know?
So capacity fee is still 7A, or that's now 6A?
On the new agenda that you will receive this afternoon, that will be the new 6A. So Sun Devil Auto will come off, and then that just slides everything up. So capacity fees becomes 6A. Sorry.
Thank
for
you.
that.
I'll just wait. I'll wait for it to refresh then. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So 6A doesn't stay on and just say continue?
Right, it'll just come, yes.
Well, Ms. Goforth, good thing you brought that up because there will be a change there.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask a question on 4C, the FF&E for the Sun Air. My question is, how many rooms are there? And again, what are we purchasing with those dollars? I know furnitures, fixtures, and equipment. Candace, you could just give us an overview again.
Yes, good morning, Mayor and Council. The furniture, fixtures, and equipment related to the Sun Air project is for the 64 rooms. So there are 64 rooms in this particular facility. And this covers all of the bed frames, the tables, kind of a shelving unit that would be in the place of a wardrobe. So a shelving unit and the mattresses.
No playground equipment or anything?
Not in this contract. This contract is with Goodman's. And so this contract is specifically for outfitting the rooms and the small office area.
Okay.
Did we obtain competitive bidding on that cost?
Mayor and Councilmember Adams, this is through a state contract, so it is off the state contract. There were 2 vendors that were reviewed, and we toured sites. The staff toured sites to look at those particular, furniture that was associated with each vendor. This vendor was found to be the best fit for our facility, and so this is off of a state contract, so we get that pricing.
How often do we compare those prices to the market?
That, Mayor and Councilmember Adams, that is probably a procurement question. We do have the ability to go out for RFP. We also have the ability to come off of a state contract. We have found that the state contract does give us very good pricing.
And staff is coming up right now to help answer that, Councilmember Adams.
Hello, Mayor. Christy Garcia, Procurement Administrator. We can, typically when we use a cooperative contract, we tell our departments to review at least 3 cooperative contracts to make sure that you're picking the best contract. So in the state contract, it is competitively bid, and it looks at state usage. So when you look at percentages of the state contract or a SAVE contract or any multiple contracts, we're getting the best pricing. And we do ask the departments to review those different cooperative contracts that are available to make sure they're picking the best one.
Mayor, I'd like
And I
to,
appreciate that answer. And Mayor, the reason I'm not going to be on video much of this is, number one, the picture looks better than what you're looking at now, and I've got a very bad connection here. So
Second.
I'm here. I'm just going to put that profile picture back up.
Thank you. Ms. Duff?
I just wanted to note, on the council report for that furniture purchase, it does provide a 10-year warranty as well on the fixtures.
I guess my question is, I was just wondering how Mesa businesses could be competitive in this bid process, you know, for procurements like this. $430,000 is a lot of money. And you know, I think if it was split up between Mesa businesses, if they have a chance to bid on it, if they even knew about it, you know, how we can do that in the future and keep that within our Mesa.
Yeah, Mayor, we do have the option to do our own solicitations and do our own proposals. Furniture is unique in the fact that it's hard to spec. There's lots of different pieces and manufacturers, and so it's always an option to do our own solicitation. But when we do our own solicitation, our quantities are our quantities versus using a state contract where quantities and spend are, you know, looking at multiple usage and quantities versus just our quantities. So, you know, we hope that we're getting the best pricing using a state cooperative contract, but we do always have that option to do our own solicitation and spec those items and then, you know, contact the local businesses, or if they're registered through our system, then they get notified. But usually a cooperative contract, we just look at those that are available and then do our due diligence and comparison off of those contracts that have already been competitively bid and awarded.
Not to get in the weeds, but I'm thinking, you know, if I know we're buying refrigerators and microwaves, right? And we have some large appliance dealers in Mesa.
Yes, those type of, Mayor, those type of items, when it comes time, yeah, we can contact our local vendors. I know there's lots of local vendors that are on contract for appliances and those miscellaneous items that we can definitely do that outreach and see what is available for us to use or do a quote. Depending on what the spend is, we have multiple options to look at.
So are appliances part of this 430?
Mayor, they are not. This
They're
is
not.
just the furniture, the outfitting, again, for the rooms themselves, as well as office furniture.
Okay.
So, and just as a note, Mayor, this is specialized furniture, and the fact that we want to make sure that this is durable over time for this particular use. And so that does make it a little bit unique to the type of furniture that we would normally purchase.
Okay.
You know, I'd just suggest that as we look at these things in the future, I concur with the mayor's comments. I think Mesa businesses should be given preference, or at least a shot. I know it's a little late for that here, but the more we can keep business within the city and allow our Mesa-based businesses to have an opportunity to bid on these things. And I know that's a broader question for another day, but I'll just close my comments on that with that.
I would agree, and I think it's hard to say we've got the best pricing if we don't go outside of the cooperative contracts. So I think that is a good idea to do, just to measure whether we actually do. Because I just want to confirm, when you say we got the best pricing, we got the best pricing of the cooperative contracts that we have agreements with.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, yes, that is correct. It is the best pricing off the cooperative contracts that we looked at. Do we know that that's the best pricing versus doing our own solicitation? No, we don't know that for sure. But, historically, cooperative contracts usually are the highest discount because they look at state volume versus our spend or our specific need. But you're correct, we don't know that for sure until we actually do it.
And Mayor and Council, I'm Lindsay Blinky with Community Services.
Is your mic on?
Lindsay Blinky with Community Services. I just wanted to add, in doing this search, we've done a very thorough discussion and site visits with many other programs that do this type of work throughout the region. And so we really looked for any type of vendor. We would love to use a local vendor, to your point. Any type of vendor that does this work in this specialized furniture. We really look at durability, and a lot of the furniture that we're talking about for this contract was really customized for social services and all of the wear and tear that goes into some of this use. And so I feel confident that we have explored, even though we only had 2 contracts to look at, that was what was available. And there were not other viable vendors that we could include in this option.
I'll just chime in. We've had this conversation before. We tend to have it when we discuss purchase of vehicles or automotive, repair services. Are we getting our Mesa businesses engaged? And I think this is where working through our staff to make sure that they're aware, that our businesses are aware. We have the Mesa Business Builder, the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, making sure that our businesses are set up to be part of the competitive bidding process for the state, for the county, and for the city as well. That's where we'll make our most bang for the buck. But I think you mentioned, we're when the state buys in bulk, it's going to be hard for a local business to compete against that. So again, we have this conversation all the time, making sure that our local businesses are able to compete at a state level and get in part of the contract. I think that's what we should focus on. And Jim's getting nervous because that's not really necessarily the part of this conversation, but thank you for answering my question also, that this is robust material and it's not IKEA, because that'll break and we're just going to buy it over and over and over again. I think dorm room furniture is the type of thing I was thinking we need for this, given the nature of the use. So thank you.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Vice Mayor's right. I mean, as long as I've been here, we've been having that balance too, right? We want to get our businesses involved, and I think procurement and business services have done a great job of doing that. Heeding council's discussion for at least the 20 years that I've been here about striking that balance, right? You want to engage the Mesa businesses, and you see it a lot. We highlight that on our agendas, right? And you'll see as we procure services, there's a lot of Mesa businesses throughout the course of the year that we do award these contracts to. But there's also trying to be good fiscal stewards as well. And if you can get better bang for the buck off these cooperative contracts, sometimes, as we discussed a few months ago, we lead those cooperative contracts, right? And so we try to maximize those opportunities from the state or other cities or from ourselves when we can buy in bulk and drive down that pricing and to get a better price for the taxpayers on that. But we hear you, and we're going to continue to be diligent with that and make sure that we're engaging our businesses as much as possible. We would love to spend our money local if it makes fiscal sense to do that.
And I would like to add that even though Goodman's isn't a Mesa business, they are an Arizona business. They are a local business for the state of Arizona and reinvest in the community. So even though we can't say Mesa, we can say it's Arizona, so we're not going corporate outside of Arizona, and they do a lot of community good. And they are a default business for commercial, industrial, office type of furniture and equipment. They're a go-to for so many businesses. They're common knowledge and a go-to business. So they're reputable, serve the community well, and have due volume for our state.
And Mayor, the last thing I'd add.
Online and get the sales.
We do give extra points. Please correct me on how I say this too. On when we score Mesa businesses, because they get credit for the local sales tax that's generated. So that helps them when we are rating businesses and looking at the comparables, that Mesa businesses get those extra points in the process for what they return back through the local sales tax.
Well, just my follow-up, I did a breakdown, $6,720 per room. I just want to make sure we're getting the most from those dollars for each room. And I like to encourage, again, Mesa businesses whenever possible. And reach out. We have new Mesa businesses coming all the time, especially on the appliance side. And I don't know about the furniture side. I don't buy furniture much, but I've been in plenty of fire stations that buy furniture, and I don't know how they do it, but perhaps we can coordinate with them. And it's durable furniture for fire stations, trust me. So,
Mayor Freeman, if I may, I was going to add that we do outreach to local businesses. We attend multiple vendor fairs, and in fact, last night we just attended a Local First Economic Development outreach for Mesa businesses, showing them, how to do business with the city, how to respond to a solicitation. We do lots of outreach to local businesses and Arizona vendors to help them learn how to do business with the city.
good. And perhaps us as council can help because we do a lot of ribbon cuttings throughout the city, and maybe we can invite vendors to apply too when we're out and about.
Yeah.
So-
I think I've referred a few, actually.
What's that?
I've referred a few.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. That's all the questions I have. Mr. Adams, that's a nice picture of you. Anything else?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. No, I have no further questions on this item. Thank you.
Where are we leaving this item? To go forward as on agenda, or you're suggesting that we go back to bid?
I will have the conversation on Monday on that too.
Okay.
I just want to have the conversation about the furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So we'll leave it at that.
Are we planning Mayor, are we planning a presentation on 5D, if it's still 5D, on Monday? Or are we going to go over that here? I thought I saw it on Monday, but I didn't look at a lot of documents.
Mayor and Vice Mayor, I believe Jeff is here and has some slides. That is the presentation that council received a couple of weeks ago.
So it's the same one?
It's the same one, right. That was to present to council, and then this is the adoption of that micro-mobility plan that was presented. But Jeff, do you?
I'm going to disagree with the boss for a minute. This is Councilmember Goforth, Mayor Councilmember Goforth. This is the presentation I presented you or promised you on implementation, on scheduling for when we're going to get signs changed out.
The implementation part.
I just pulled it up Monday. What I saw was the Mesa Connected plan. So that's different than this plan.
Should be under.
Okay.
Go over the PowerPoint. There should be.
There's a lot of
There you go.
plans, in my defense. I think we're planning.
So, Mr.
What did he say?
I'm sorry, Mr. McVeigh. So this is the parking signage, drop-off areas for ride share, so forth and so on, and nothing beyond that. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, this is actually, we put together a slide deck to talk about all the implementation that would happen in the short term. And those are all the implementation that we can do under our current programs and our current budget without having to come back to council as part of our capital improvement program discussions.
Okay, so this is essentially the implementation of making parking downtown Mesa more accessible and identifiable, correct?
That for sure is a big part of this, yes.
Okay. Does this involve and I'm sorry, we've seen so many things here recently. Does this also involve the Center Street bike lanes, roundabout, and that planning, or is this not including that yet?
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, that is a discussion that you will have. I saw that Eric snuck up to the front row, so that'd be a separate discussion outside of this implementation.
Okay, all right. Eric can stand down. I was just curious if it included that or not.
Councilmember Adams, the presentation was done on October 23rd. So I don't remember if you attended or not, but it's that line item from October 20, the study session on October 23rd, and now it's on agenda.
Okay, I'm just simply trying to understand the scope of what we're going to be voting on.
Understood. Mayor, Councilmember Adams, the scope of what you're going to be voting on Monday is on the micromobility plan. The micromobility plan does have recommendations as it relates to the parking which we can present quickly the implementation efforts that we can have and the timing for those implementation if we move forward. It also includes the recommendations as it relates to the streets and the striping plans that we have. Transportation will be implementing over the next 4 years as part of their pavement preservation plan, as well as some longer-term goals that would include removal of traffic signals, as well as relocation of curb lines that would require capital improvement program funding that would be kind of a longer-term discussion. So we could quickly run through, if you'd like, the implementation slides and give you a sense of what you can expect in the short term if you move forward with approving the plan.
Let me just be really direct with my question. Is a vote for this, a vote for the roundabout, all the restriping, the narrowing of center, and so forth, or is it simply a vote for the parking?
Oh. Understood. Mayor, Councilmember Adams, a vote for this plan is a vote for essentially a planning and policy document. So this is a guide for moving forward. That includes the restriping. That does include recommendations for Center Street, but Center Street there is nothing in this plan that requires you to move forward. We know that Center Street is a separate discussion, a separate vote of council that would have to happen to move forward with.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. McVeigh. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Adams, did you want a brief presentation, or you want to wait till later and go through it?
I don't need it now, no. I was simply seeking clarification on that last question I asked. And I believe Mr. McVeigh has provided it.
I do have one question, though. I asked about how many permits you have for parking, and you didn't know that number, based on the overall parking spaces in the city that are available. And I just asked a random question about how many permits are out there based on the number of parking places.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, actually, we did not look that up yet. I can get that for you and send it over today.
Yeah, let's do it to council so we know. I mean, there's all the different colored parking places, and to make parking easier for people. I know we're looking at some beta programming, AI, put in addresses, what parking's available.
And Mayor, to that point, I do want to make sure that we clarify, and we have our Department of Innovation and Technology folks here as well that can pop up. We are working, right? Do It is working on a parking app, and that parking app that they have, and I think maybe that you have seen and had demonstrations of, is pretty robust where it is applied, but it's only applied in a few lots so far. It's kind of a beta test, okay. And so there is some effort that would need to be that would have to happen in order to get that parking app to the point where it's ready to roll out to the general public. So we do have, if you could go up a couple slides. There you go. There is, and just as a note, if this is something that council is interested in moving forward more rapidly, there is some additional cost that would be associated with it. It's not a huge cost, but around $30,000 to $60,000 to finish getting out all the cameras that we need to do. Do It has done a good job of when PD is out putting cameras out on the streets or in the garages as part of their crime prevention, that they're looking at those projects, and where they're able to, they're adding cameras to those projects in order to get the coverage that we need for garages and things like that. But there is some effort necessary in order to get that parking app to the point where it is ready for public consumption.
So for clarity, the cameras that you would be asking us to invest in would also be used as part of the real-time crime center for safety downtown?
What, and I don't know if Harry wants to jump up, but there's been more than one instance where PD is out there putting cameras out for the real-time crime center, where Do It has grabbed onto that and said, we're going to add a few more cameras, and then we get all the coverage that we need for parking, and it's kind of a good collaboration. Yes.
So dual use, I like it.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, yeah, that is correct. That has always been part of the main focus of this project, was not to invest in something that just has a single use for parking, which doesn't really have a clear ROI, like in other areas where there's paid parking. In our downtown, all of the parking today is free parking in our lots and garages. So most of the projects, most of the vendors out there that provide systems for this type of service bank on you charging for that parking. So when we've looked at the ability to get third-party vendors in to do similar apps and parking management, it's potentially a seven-figure investment, hundreds of thousands of dollars per lot in some cases, where they're expecting you to be charging for that parking. With our free parking, we find that internally, just applying some application development staff to it and investing in the cameras that have the dual use for public safety gets us a lot of bang for the buck.
Thank you. Excellent.
Let's go for it.
I just want to say thank you for putting this together. This is helpful and more specific as to when things were done and when they are going to be done. I was just, for the life of me, I was like, what is a Smart Park app?
Parking, yeah, thank you.
Smart.
Be
Anyway.
smart in your parking. Yes.
Yeah, a Smart Park app. Anyway, thank you. I appreciate this presentation.
Well, last night I was at Cedar Core having a little pizza there with my brother's birthday, and there was overflow parking, going there and, spilling into the alleyway and then the old Mesa Tribune parking lot. So it's been, just having these apps or availability for people to know where to park, because the street parking was not available. And of course, I drive a little bigger vehicle than most people, so I look for a larger space to park. But anyway, found it, and just making availability, the parking, the ease of it, having that accessible, I think will help our downtown businesses significantly. So we encourage you, Harry, you and your team get after it.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Adams? Are you good?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Reddy, anything?
Sorry, my bad.
Okay, council, did we cover all the agenda items you wished? Okay. Other than that, we'll move over to 2A, follow-up presentation on the water utility recommended rate adjustments. Brian, Chris.
All right, good morning, Mayor and Council. Brian Ritchell, Management and Budget Director. Along with me today is Chris Hassert, the Water Resources Director. So last week, we presented an update of the utility rates, and Council requested a scenario. And so we'll go through those scenarios, and another one was requested over the weekend. So I'll present those two. First off, what I wanted to remind Council is the recommended rate adjustment with capacity fee, the forecast here. And what I wanted to highlight here was at the end of this forecast, years 3, 4, and 5, what we did during the budget process was Water Resources worked really hard in looking at their budget, and they pushed out about $180 million worth of cost of maintenance projects, just to be able to kind of look at the forecast and keep it within our financial principles and policies. So with that, we pushed out $180 million worth of projects. However, with the capacity fee, we were able to move $400 million of projects within the next 10 years out of the forecast that would be funded by capacity fees. So that's why you see an increase in net sources and uses and the positive percentages for the fund balance. What we'll be doing this coming budget year is taking a look at that $180 million. If it's still $180 million, it might be a little bit more with inflation of those projects, and bringing them back into the forecast. So just to let you know that this net sources and uses currently and the percentages will most likely reduce, but we will keep it in with our financial principles and policies. So what we presented last week was these are the recommended forecast rate adjustments for residential, multi-unit, and then also the commercial side. The service charge for all the areas was a 4.5% increase. Residential's tier 1 and 2 was a 3.5, along with tiers 3 and 4, 4.5. And then you see the rest of them down below. Multi-unit was 12% for usage, and then commercial usage is 13. Landscape is at 20. Just a reminder, we moved that from 15 to 20 per council's direction. And then the large commercial industrial is at 19. So this is what was presented in the forecast in the previous slide in that forecast and was recommended by staff. Last week, council recommended asked us to go back and look at a scenario of if we were able to if we zeroed out residential and multi-unit and keeping everything the same, revenues, net sources and uses, percentage of fund balance, keeping everything the same, what would the commercial rate adjustments need to be able to do that? So below is what the commercial rate adjustments would be. So the service charge would go from 4.5% to 12%. Commercial usage would be at 25%. Commercial landscape usage would be at 30%. And large commercial industrial usage would be at 13%. The next year is where we would go back to our forecast. Just a reminder that we do evaluate this on an annual basis, so those percentages could fluctuate a little bit. However, for the current forecast, we would go to back down to those rates. What was also requested was if we did a 2.5% rate adjustment increase for residential and multi-unit. So here you see if we did a 2.5% across the board for service charge and usage charges for both residential and multi-unit, what the impact would be to commercial service charge would be at 7.5%. Commercial usage would be at 20%, and then commercial landscape and large commercial industrial usage would both be at 25%. So bringing those three, I know one of the things that we're looking at doing is parity between commercial or non-residential and residential of revenues and consumption. So previously since maybe 3 years ago, residential was the major most consuming of the water resources, and the revenues came in with that. However, in the past couple of years, commercial now is consuming more of our water resources. So what we wanted to do was make parity between that revenue coming in also. So with the current forecast that we have, that parity would be in fiscal year 27-28. With the council requested scenario of no residential revenues, that parity would move a year forward into next fiscal year 26-27. With a 2.5% across the board for residential and multi-unit, that parity would be in fiscal year 27-28. And then you have the down at the bottom, we have the consumption to where you see that residential is now about 48% and non-residential is about 52% of the consumption of water. So a customer impact on this slide, so reading from left to right, we have the 4 categories: residential, multi-unit development, commercial, general, and also commercial landscape. So the current monthly bill that we have now for what we call a typical, and I'll get into a typical a little bit later, our typical customer residential uses around 6,000 gallons, or 6 kgal a month. So currently their bill is about $43.57. With a recommended rate adjustment with the capacity fee, their total impact of the service charge and usage charge would be about a 4.2% increase. So it'd be about a $1.84 per month increase. If we move on over to the non-residential, that adjustment is 0 because we'd be zeroing that out. And Then with a 2.5, it would average out about 2.5, so it's just over $1 impact. Moving on down to the multi-unit, it's $40.46 currently. So with the recommended rate, what we're looking at is an 8.7% increase and about a $3.52 a month with a recommended. So what we're trying to do here is also move the multi-unit development, because we know most of those accounts are residential. We're trying to move that up to equal about the residential a month bill. So then moving on over, zero would be zero, so they'd stay around $40.46. And then if we did a 2.5, it'd be just over $1 also increase per month. Now moving down to the commercial general, their current bill is about $78.59. With the current recommended forecast, it's a 7.4% blended increase, so about a little over $5. A 0%, that would be a 16.4% blended rate of the usage and the service charge. So they would see about a $12.88 per month increase. And then if we did a 2.5, that percentage would be about 11.8% and just over $9, about $9.24 per month increase. Now, if we move down to the commercial landscape, currently it's about $177 per month for general or commercial landscape. With our recommended rate, the blended percentage increase is 15.3%, so about a little over $27 per month. If we did zero for residential and non-residential, the impact for that commercial would be a 24.4% blended increase, so a little over $43 a month. And then if we did the 2.5, it would be about a 19.6% increase, so about $34. So this is kind of the impact of a typical water customer for those three categories. And what I would like to do is go back, because I know the question came up of a couple of times last week of how do we calculate a typical residential monthly water consumption? So what we do is this is just the support slides, and I can send this out to council after the meeting. So what we did was we take the residential monthly consumption, we take every bill per month, and then we put them in these categories. So 29% of the bills for fiscal year 24-25 landed in between the 0 and 3 kgal category in the tier. And just to remind council, is 0 to 3 kgal is included in the service charge. So all they are doing is paying the service charge to receive that water for those. Now moving into tier ones, 4, 5, and 6 kgal, 26% of the bills are within tier 1. So combining those two, 55% of the monthly bills, our usage is kgal or less. And then you see the outer ones, it starts going down. And then you see out there 25 plus 5% of the bills. But so 55%, and this is where we get the typical. So our typical is 55% of the monthly bills that the MESA sees. 55% of that is 6,000 kgal or less. So that's what we consider a typical customer is 6,000 or less. So with that coming back up to here with the typical, yes.
Sorry, Mayor. Do you turn it on for Holly's sake? Do you have that same kind of slide for the typical business as well, the other categories?
Well, Mayor and Vice Mayor Summers, I can give you that breakdown. So a full 1/3 of all our commercial customers use in that 3 kgal or less. So those are your small businesses, like a hair salon. You're going to have a bathroom that's not going to have a lot of water usage, or any kind of small business that just is not water intensive. So a full 1/3 of our customers are in that 0 to 3 kgal, so they're not paying for any usage. The usage that they do use, that small amount, is baked into the service charge. And then if you look at the middle third, so actually a little bit more, maybe the middle 35%, 36%, they use from that 3 kgal and just incrementally range all the way up to about 24,000 gallons a month. And then it's that top 30%, those are our big water users, all the way up to mega water users. So it's that top 30%, which is about 1,700 or so businesses use from 24 kgal all the way up into seven figures, a million gallons. So there's that I can count on one hand how many use that much.
So Mayor, skew to the million gallons, is that covered by our large water user ordinance? Or is that a little different?
Well, it's related.
Okay.
It forces large business, especially
Thank you.
anything over about 300,000 gallons a day, that large water user ordinance forces that business to then go on the market, get water supplies, deed those over to the city of Mesa. But they're acquiring those supplies and paying for them, and then we're treating the water and delivering it.
So what I'd be interested in hearing from you, and you probably don't have this data here, is the unintended consequences of raising, again, I go back to just flushing your toilet is one thing and using. So a typical single-family home is the water is going to go for landscaping, it's going to go for flushing the toilet, brushing your teeth, all that stuff. So that's a pretty accurate number. But these small businesses that might be in, say, a strip mall or some kind of facility, they're renting their space, also have to pay a rent. And baked into that rent are going to be things like the water that goes to that business for landscaping, for example. So is there a way to break that down, what that might cost a small business when the commercial property has to pay for the added water rate for landscaping? I could tell you don't have that's a math problem, but it's like, how do we get our head around? Could you put that slide back up, please?
Yeah, and just to Mayor, Vice Mayor, just to point out too, on the left-hand side, the typical customer, we do have below each category the usage of each typical customer. So for instance,
is that on that slide? Or are you
this
talking
slide
about
right here
this
that I'm
one?
on right now. So the commercial general, 9,000 kgal per month is your typical general commercial. And then commercial landscape is your typical customer is 29 kgal. So and then multi-unit is about the same as residential, is 6,000 kgal per month. So we do this calculation just to see what the typical customer is for per category, and then see what the impact is for those typical customers.
So with this commercial landscape, the typical customer, would that be a strip mall kind of facility with multiple tenants in it, or is this going to be McDonald's? I don't know.
Golf
course could be a lot.
It's not going to be any of those. It's going to be more of an office complex that has a lot of landscaping. And then, so if you look at our commercial customers, there's 5,919 and about 3,400 of those. So about 60-something% of those commercial businesses do have a separate commercial meter. Those are going to be more your office parks that have some decorative lawn and a lot of trees and shrubs. And 70% of your water usage when you have landscape like that is 70% is going to be used outside. So that's why they have that separate meter, so they don't have to pay the wastewater charge.
So this 177 would then be part of their rent and broken down based on the number of people that are in there? Would that be accurate?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, it would depend on the owner of the property and how they distribute it on that. We wouldn't be able to answer that question.
I'd like to also
Let
point
me
out.
wrap my head around it a little more. Thank you.
On residential, most families will fall within the 6 kgal, maybe a little more, maybe 7. And getting into the higher tiers is reflective of water being used for landscape. Because for showers and toilets and, sinks and stuff like that, you're in the lower tiers. So you also have to think about, if you want to discourage landscape, this also happens at the residential level.
You mean xeriscape. We want to encourage smart water use in the landscape.
Right, so when you get to the higher tiers in residential, it's indicative of having, of the water going to landscape.
Yeah, and I get that. We want to encourage that. And for folks, there's somebody in my neighborhood that has a lush landscape, a lazy river. I wish I had one. I guess if I had that money, I wouldn't care what I'm paying for the water.
Or
But
sprinklers when it's raining, it's awesome.
I completely understand that. I think what I've been kind of focusing my questions on is, I think it's easier to wrap my head around how this impacts a resident because it's all really one bill. Whereas for small business, you know, some of whom are struggling still, what is the impact potentially here? And it's not just related to the direct water bill, which doesn't seem too bad, but if they're renting space, that owner's going to have, and that's going to, you know, impact their business as well. And it clearly is difficult to get there. I have a separate question. Does somebody else want to go? You want me to ask it?
Well, I want to say something.
Yeah.
When you said small businesses, let's dive on that. You said a lot of them use 0 to 3 kgal.
1/3.
And so they're not going to be charged. I mean, it's just a service charge.
Right, Mayor Freeman, so they would pay the service charge. So that's why the increases were recommended. It's broken down into both categories. The bigger one is on the usage, and then the smaller increase is on the service charge.
Right.
What's your definition of a small business?
Well, when I say 1/3, I'm using a generic term for small business. I'm not trying to categorize small business. I'm just saying 1/3 most likely are going to be businesses that have like 1 bathroom.
Okay.
And not a lot of outdoor use.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we also have small businesses like breweries, which we value, that use a larger amount of water, but they really aren't a large employer by any means, but they will be impacted by higher water use because they use a lot of water to make beverages, to make beer, to make cider. That's just one example. I'm just aware of that with the conversations of business owners in downtown who are breweries and cideries and stuff, that the water affects them as well as all the aluminum tariffs and everything like that. Our philosophy in Mesa has been to have gradual, incremental increases for everybody, including our businesses. And our businesses are very important to us. We want to be business friendly. We depend on sales tax. We are trying to attract more businesses here. I think it's fair to ask a residential customer for the 3.5% increase. The rate of inflation, or the CPI, is 3%. I think it's very fair. Every product you buy, everything you buy will have that baked in on inflation. It's very rare that you don't have products or things that you're buying increase by the rate of inflation. So when we think about what our philosophy is, it has been historically, which I agree with, is very small, reflective, small increases as we go along. For a business to suddenly have, their water rate jumped 20%, as a business, I would be very upset. You understand the 3%, 5%, 10%, but then it starts getting, I know we want parity, but I think to gain parity, again, it's going to have to be gradual increases so that we are business friendly. And I think it's fair for a resident to absorb a rate that is reflective of the rate of inflation. And it's, 87% you said last week or something?
For the percent of residential customers. So we have some updated numbers. So last week I said 88% of all of our total metered customers is residential. So that was from a pie chart we did in an earlier presentation, I think over a year ago. So we went and updated everything. So we went at current numbers through the end of October. And with all the residential development we've had in East Mesa, Southeast Mesa, up in the Lehigh area especially too, that has ticked up. So the percent of single family residential customers is now 90.66%. So it's ticked up from about 88 up to between 90 and 91. Now, if you add in the multi-unit, so any kind of metered connection for whether you're talking about a triplex or a 75-unit apartment building, that's another 2.3% of all of our metered customers. So now you're at 93%, all classes of residential, of our 154,000 total customers. Commercial is about 3.84% of the 154,000. So it's just under 6,000 customers are commercial. And then we have another 2.2% of meters are the commercial landscape. So now you're at about 5% for commercial-related classifications. Most of that is the actual meter for the potable water, and then there is a few thousand that are commercial landscape meters. So those commercial businesses, going back to what I talked about earlier, it's mainly going to be more like office parks that have outdoor turf and landscaping. They're going to have the commercial meter. So that gives you a breakdown, a profile of all the customers and how it separates out.
Okay, that's starting to clear
Did
up.
you have your question?
Yeah. What I wanted to follow up on, Brian, is one of my concerns is moving forward. We've seen what happens if we underestimate. Other cities have underestimated what it takes to maintain their systems. And what we've witnessed lately in the newspaper are massive increases to make up for deficits that what was discussed before, the difference between small incremental increases and ignoring a problem, and then you eventually have to pay the bills. So when I look at the chart on page 2, you use this all the time. Have you run the same scenario for the 2.5% and the 0%? I know you have fiscal year 26, 27 here, but how does this look? How does this forecast out through 3031? Do we have that chart?
Yes, Mayor, Vice Mayor, in preparation, this is in the support slides for any questions like that. So if we did a 0 increase for residential and multi-unit, so as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, what we did was we only wanted to look at, because what was direction from council was just looking at changing fiscal year 25, 26, and then keeping the rest of the forecast the same as what it was presented. So that's where in 25, 26, what you'll see is the 0% for water residential, tier 1, then water commercial usage is 25%, and then the rest of them we did not change. So, but however, on the outer years, we are still keeping a tier 1 usage charge at 3.5%, a water commercial at 13% on out for those water customers. And then for a 2.5% 2.5% water usage across the board for water residential tier 1, and then water commercial would be at 20%. But then we kept constant the rest of the forecast usage percent adjustments to keep the forecast the same.
Why does the reserve balance get slightly better with these other options than the original?
Is
it just rounding?
Yes.
Okay, that's darn. All right, thank you.
Mr. Redia?
I think just a comment on the commercial side, because when I came on council, I think we had the inverse effect of residential paying so much compared to commercial, and I think over the maybe 5-6 years, we've kind of moved it along to balance it more on what I'm aware of. Slide. What is it? 6 it's based on usage, right? As far as the parity analysis, right? And so I think that's an important slide to know how we can maintain that balance, because as a person that leases out about 5,500 square feet of commercial space, the cost just gets put to the business owner as far as any additional costs. It gets assumed into the lease, right? And so you get fluctuations, and not only you're paying a monthly lease, but then water, if you get, city waste, right? Recycling, all those adds, and it just fluctuates as far as a monthly kind of bill that you get as a small business owner. And so we just gotta maintain awareness of that piece. And it's a little difficult, I think, to identify per what Councilmember Summers trying to, because it depends on how much you lease out and the amount you use compared to like, there's other users in where I lease, and so they have much smaller offices and they do different things, right? And so it just depends, but the bill, it just gets put back into that operator, right? Like that's a small business owner that rents out, either 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 square feet. And so it just, I think the importance is having that balance of how we are, that parity of residentials to commercial as we move forward and how we identify. I agree, if we do zero, I think the impact on the small businesses is immediately affected, right? Because you're talking about over 20% of an increase, which is, that's not a great look either, right? As far as how we then are passing down to that small business owner. And so that's my point here is, this parity analysis, I think it's an important aspect to where we wanted to take over the last 6+ years on how we identify, what residents pay and then commercial, and that can get, we can't get out of whack as well on the commercial side, because then it's gonna hurt quite considerable these small businesses. And so that's my point on here. The incremental pieces as far as increase, I think that's where that philosophy is what has made us kind of a better kind of identifying the costs as far as what we as residents or both small businesses have to pay. I think that's an important aspect to identify. And I think Mayor Freeman in the last meeting, when we did zero several years back, it did jump. We had to increase quite considerably the residential rates. And so we just that context is an important aspect to how we proceed in identifying these rates. And again, every year we look at these rates, right? And so the adjustments that we can make on a yearly basis is an important aspect to how we look at the future to this. But I'll leave it there.
All right, thank you. Mr. Adams, do you have any comments? We'll go to you next.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Excuse me, just a couple. First, I would like to thank Mr. Ritchell. I know that he had to jump in and do a good amount of analysis work here to provide us these various scenarios that were requested, and they're very informative. I appreciate that. I also, I probably started some of this conversation and got this ball rolling in our last session. And this is because I am always more interested in rather than saying, well, we've always done it this way, I like to look at how could we do it differently, and maybe rather than make the baseline assumption that we must always increase rates, particularly residential rates. Wouldn't it be great if we could find a way to not have to increase rates? So that was the discussion that I was trying to encourage, and I think what's resulted here is some really good information for us to look at and juggle. Those darn triple net leases, Mr. Heredia is absolutely right. That will trickle down to the tenant as in the case of the smaller commercial stuff and the larger. So that's another important point to consider. One comment I would have is we're trying to encourage xeriscaping. I'm not trying to suggest that someone who prefers to have a green lawn and is willing to pay for it, fine. But on the commercial landscape side, an observation I would make is sometimes cost is a driver in decision making, and if we're trying to encourage more xeriscape, maybe that's a consideration we should talk about. Overall, the other The only other observation I would offer at this point in time, I know we're going to take this conversation up again on Monday. I very much appreciate these forward-looking analyses that Mr. Ritchell has presented here. The concern I have with them is that, and I'm reflecting back on last year's discussions that I've reviewed, it's always way out there. In this case, 28, 29, 29, 30, 30, 31, where the number becomes positive. And it would be helpful if at some point in time, and I'm not trying to suggest Mr. Ritchell burn the midnight oil again, this could be a conversation for another day. I'd like to see over time how accurate we've been from projection to actuality. That would be very helpful. Because, and I'm not suggesting there's any reason not to rely on these numbers. I think this is a very thorough analysis. But I'd like to see how accurate we are. And with that, I'll close my remarks with a thank you again, Mr. Ritchell.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
One more quick question for you. It's just a curiosity. The residential use is 6 kgals a month. The multi-unit development is also 6 kgals a month. How is that? Because residential might have pools and all that kind of thing. How is it multi-unit development is the exact same as residential?
Well, the average for commercial is much higher. The number, if you're looking at median, so half the customers below, half above, the median's low, but commercial, once you get into usage, it's those top.
Multi-unit development, we're talking about multi-unit residential.
Multi-unit residential.
Yeah, it says 6 kgals. So if I'm looking at slide 7, typical customer residential 6 kgals a month. Okay, I get that. Multi-unit development apartments is 6 kgals a month.
It's a little more nuanced, so.
Yeah.
Eric, can you come up and explain that? Eric is our stat master. That's not his official job title, that's what I call him.
Eric, do you want to be called the stat master?
I don't mind. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. We use 6 kgals a month for multi-unit development because it provides a equal comparison to our residential customers. Now, multi-unit development, it can also include like patio homes, so not just apartments and whatnot. But the real goal here is to create that parity between residential and multi-unit development. Like an apartment building, you know, that's mostly domestic usage. So your typical apartment building might be 4 or 5 kgals, but your typical patio home, that's going to be more along the lines of 6 kgals.
Okay, so it's to provide at least some parity in our conversations what that is, but we wouldn't expect somebody in a studio or one-bedroom apartment to be using 6,000 gallons a month. They're going to be using.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, yes, sir, you're correct.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Ms. Goldfarb.
Along those lines, help me understand, how do you know that, I guess, when there's 1 meter? So for instance, Chris, you know, there are also 55-plus communities that are individual owners, but there's 1 meter going into it, a 3-inch meter or something. Chris, right, the email that you and I were going back and forth with.
Sure. So Mayor, Council Member Goforth. So it's just a lot of, those are industry standard numbers, and it's just decades and decades of data collection and analysis. And it comes down to a number of fixtures. If you have a small apartment, it's just the number of plumbing fixtures you have. And it's just averages over time and analysis that shows that a studio apartment or a 1-bedroom apartment that has 1 occupant or two occupants, it's just, those are the averages, very low water usage. If you get a 60-unit apartment building, most of the water is not going to be used inside. It's actually going to be used watering the common areas, the trees, the shrubs, the grass, stuff like that.
Okay. I'd just like to provide a couple comments as well. I appreciate you doing the additional calculations. But I guess, you know, to Rich's comment about always assuming the status quo, I would hope not, and I don't think so, because it's very justified based on the increase in costs that we have, why we have an adjustment and an increase. This to me is not just an assumption. I like that I agree with the philosophy of the smooth, predictable, lower, and it's, clearly some of the surrounding municipalities are seeing the light, right? Because that's easier on our residents, it's easier on our businesses. I'm very sensitive, as Councilmember Heredia is, to, radically changing in 1 year a business's rates. But on the other hand, I think it's important that we get to that parity quickly, more quickly than was proposed originally. I think we're on the right track. It's getting quicker, and I think that that's definitely important. But I don't think that in 1 year we should radically change their rates 30%. So I don't think it's just assumed that rates happen every year. I think they're very justified in the costs that we have. The part that I think is assumed is our transfer. That part is just assumed. Because to me, what I've seen, that's not based on the increased cost that it covers in our general fund, unless I just haven't seen it. That transfer, we make an assumption it's 30% every year. It goes towards our general fund, but those costs, it's not back-ended. That's what I would like to see. I would like to see it justified by the cost from the general fund, as opposed to just a given. It doesn't have to be the 30%, correct?
So, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, for that question, yes, correct. It is, the ordinance has stated that it's no more than 30% of operating revenues are transferred to the general fund to support public safety for 25%, and then 5% general governmental, but some of that general governmental does support public safety, so it's a little bit more than the 25.
Right.
So yes, it's not assumed that it's gonna go over there. It is written in the ordinance that up to 30% of the operating revenues does get transferred. That discussion we can have during the budget process, and we can show you if we did not do a budget transfer, what the effect of the general governmental fund would be, or if we even lowered it or froze it or anything like that.
No, I don't think nobody's
we can have that.
suggesting we get rid of it, but I think it's important for us to see, the cost increase and justification for the amount that gets transferred, right? That it's not just an assumption, it's not assumed. I have every faith and trust that that's what you do, but we don't get presented that way.
So, yes, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, and to your other comment about not assuming these rate adjustments every year, the way we start this process back in June and July is we zero out the rate adjustments completely for the year, and then we go and see, okay, what does the rate adjustment need to be able to continue our operations of the utilities.
That's great. Yeah, that's good.
Mayor, I'd like to add one comment. The biggest stressor on our costs for water is our need for water and the scarcity of water. We have CAP doing huge increases, so that's just the product itself that we're buying. But we're investing our investments to preserve our water supplies and to make sure they're as affordable as possible are very, very heavy right now because it's very, very necessary. We can't absorb the cuts and the water costs that are going on in the CAP. So we have the central reuse pipeline. We're digging wells, we're working with dams, we're expanding our water treatment plant so we can treat more water to exchange with the Gila River Indian community to keep our rates low. Is a huge amount of investment going on that we historically have not done in such a short amount of time in order to preserve our water and keep it affordable. So right now, yeah, it's a heavy load. It's affecting what we're doing, but it's what we need to do for the sustainability of our city. And this will affect every municipality in the valley, and how they're going to adjust for the water. So that's a huge pressure. It's something that we need to do for our long-term sustainability as far as making sure we have the water supply at the best rates possible. If we don't make these investments, it's going to astronomically affect our city. So there's a lot of pressures, and we can see on our ending reserve that it keeps on going down and down and down. And our, I just want to say it's just not the usual game of water just being a static cost, and some chemicals are more expensive. This is a bigger picture of our investments. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just confirm a couple things? So from last year to this year, the largest increase in costs were our operating expenditures and our debt service transfer. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth. That is correct. A lot of the operating costs that we do is water purchases. That is within our operating costs. But then, yes, the debt service is going up. That is due to us issuing bonds, our first and second bonds for the three major projects that we're doing, the Central Mesa Reuse Pipeline, Signal Butte expansion, and then also the AMI. We just issued bonds for that, so that debt service will be coming on, and so that is the significant portion of the increase for debt service.
And presuming we pass the capacity fee, that will start to decrease.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, that is part of the $400 million. We're able to go back so far to recapture some of those expenses with the capacity fee, but with what Chris presented with the capacity fee about a month or two ago, that $400 million of those costs of other projects, also expansion projects, is taken out of this forecast and would be paid for by the capacity fee. And yes, the debt service, as you will see in the forecast, the debt service transfer does lower.
I think those are important points, and Jen makes a good point. I mean, the operating expenditures are not coming down. I mean, they're not going the other direction. Water's getting more expensive and more scarce, but I think the capacity fee is going to be a good reliever for that debt service transfer.
Mr. Adams?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm glad Councilmember Goforth brought up the point that she did on what I'll call the 30% transfer, which on its face I'm supportive of, because most, if not all of it, to my understanding, is supportive of public safety. However, in this process, what I've noticed is, in my experience in business, 40-some years, I've done a lot of budgets, including a bank and various businesses, and it's troubling in a way that we consider such an important issue as these utility rates separate of the overall budget picture. And I was reminded of this when Councilmember Goforth raised the issue of the funds transfer. It's almost like trying to hit the bullseye in the dark. For me, speaking for myself alone, making decisions based on the utility rates when we haven't quite gotten to the overall general budget. And I'm sure there's a good reason why we do these things separately. Maybe something that we've done for many years, I would assume. But again, challenging the status quo, maybe this is a discussion for another day. I don't know how we can speak much to that 30%. Maybe it should be 25. Maybe it should be 28.3. I don't know, because we're not talking about the overall budget and looking at the impact of those funds on the general city budget. So I don't want to open up another Pandora's box here, but for me, for my edification, it would make more sense if we consider these things together. This would be like me trying to work my firm's budget while leaving payroll or some other major expense off to the side to be dealt with later. Just some observations there for what they're worth. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Adams, I'm sorry, I'm a little tired today, but I want to stress that we know last year's budget was stretched and everybody was making cuts. And being static, we will continue to make cuts this year. We do not have enough revenue in our budget for the status quo of how we're running our city right now. We're using some reserves and we're making cuts every year because we lost revenue on the rental sales tax. That was over 20 million, and there's some other losses. So we are suffering cuts on our general fund. We know we didn't make the cuts last year because we had to take cuts in all our departments. We're planning on cuts this year. We will plan on cuts every single year until we figure out a revenue source to replace what we lost. And we have a long list of infrastructure maintenance things. I don't know what level we keep on running our city without making investments and keep on just feeding a budget that's not working because we're cutting and cutting and cutting because of the loss of revenues. And now if we want to consider cutting this, a business model that we created so we didn't have to have a primary property tax, we use our utilities as a business model. If we eradicated it and paid SRP, we would be paying the same rates we are now, but we wouldn't have any revenue, so we would definitely have a primary property tax. So this is a business model, and we're using the revenues from the business model to fund our budget.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Duff. I appreciate that perspective,
And
but that's not
up to
what I was
30%
saying.
was created, what, 4 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Duff, it was created in March of 2020, was that ordinance that came to council for that. And to Councilmember Adams's comment about why we do this separately, this was a decision the city and council made, I believe, 6 or 7 years ago, that we moved the rate process. It used to be during the budget process. However, when the rates went into effect, it was July 1, which is the heat of the summer. And in the heat of the summer, a majority of customers' bills are water, a significant amount. And so with the rate increases, along with the heat and the air conditioning, the electric, things like that, what we decided to do was move the rate adjustment process to the fall. So when the rate adjustments go into effect, that it would be during the winter time where there's less usage of electric, less usage of water and other commodities, so where the impact of the increases was not as significant as a summertime increase.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ritchell. I understand that, and I think those are all good reasons. I don't know that it necessarily forces us to consider the matters separately because we could always set a different date for the rates to go into effect. Just a quick response. I'm not suggesting we do anything that would incur us to have to consider a primary property tax, which I would always be absolutely opposed to. I'm simply asking what's wrong with looking at addressing these things in a different way. I understand that we're looking at some very tight revenue situations. All I'm doing is suggesting maybe there are other ways to look at this, and maybe there are other ways to consider the data.
I would agree. I would add, Jen, this is about process, not necessarily the numbers. Everything you said is correct, but this is just about process and assumptions.
And then again 4 years ago, so we can change again. We can change again. This isn't historically forever. It was,
And
what, 2 years
and I didn't
ago,
necessarily say we
when
should
we
change.
changed
We just need
utility
to
rates
be
and do this review. It was in
communicated to.
conjunction with the budget. And we changed it, what, 2 years ago? You just said it. Anyway, I'm sorry. And then as far as the percentage transfer, that was 5 years ago. So we can continue to change it, change when we do our rates, change our percentages.
Again, it's about us knowing the justification and not making assumptions. That's it. If we need $147 million for public safety in the general fund, then that should be presented to us and justified. That's all I'm saying. It shouldn't be an automatic.
All right, thank you, Council. I have one question, Brian. When we draw down the reserve fund, how many dollars are we taking out of reserve fund to supplement our water this time around? Yeah, I know it's in the
Mayor,
area.
yeah, I would have to look to see the details. I don't have the details with me, but I'd have to look to see what our total water purchases are. I can work with Water Resources in getting that number for you.
Well, just for the record, we draw down our reserve fund to supplement what we're doing today. And Chris, to your point, water increases, our cap water purchases, are they increasing now? Do you have any forecast? I know we're about $350 an acre foot. And do you contractually, how far does that go out? Then we're going to bring on the cap and the Central Mesa Reuse Pipeline. I don't want to get into the weeds, but overall, we know our water is going to be increasing, but
Sure,
to the first question.
Mayor Freeman. So we work with CAP pretty closely. They project out, just like we project out all of our budgets, they project out where the cost of the CAP water is going to go for the different classifications. And for municipal and industrial, it is a little bit north of $350 an acre foot. With the exchange we do with the Gila River Indian Community, so this is tying back to the pipeline system with the effluent, giving them the effluent and then getting in exchange their Colorado River water. What we don't talk about probably enough is that cost. The cost per acre foot for the water we get from the community is only $85 an acre foot versus $365 an acre foot. So right now, with the plants that are already delivering effluent to the community, it's about 14% of our cap water. And when the new pipeline goes into operation early next year, it'll essentially double that. So about 28% of the cap water that we're going to order in the future is only going to be down at that $85 an acre foot, right? So the rest is going to be $365. So you can see how fast that pipeline is going to pay for itself because the water is just a fraction of the cost. The actual water is so cheap. But every year, we're going to be at, for municipal and industrial, we're going to be at $400 an acre foot very quickly. And a lot of that has to do with the federal government coming in. Yesterday was the deadline for all 7 states to come to some agreement on what the next 20-year playbook is going to look like to operate the Colorado River water. The deadline came and went, no agreement. They're giving us a little bit more time. They're going to force our hand pretty soon. And when they cut how much water Arizona gets, there's still fixed cost in that rate that needs to be paid. So you're spreading that fixed cost over a smaller pie, right, of water. So that's driving up the unit cost. So we'll be at $400 an acre foot probably by the end of this 5-year period. The water we get from the exchange, though, you're only paying the energy. Why it's so cheap is we only have to pay the energy component. So that 85 might only be 95 at the end of 5 years, which makes the pipeline and the exchange even more attractive. So those are the things we're doing to try to suppress cost escalation, but there's things that are out of our control because still we're going to be at 75% of the water we get is going to be this M&I, municipal and industrial water, and we can't control the costs, and nobody in Arizona can control that. But that's just one input cost. We pay about $20 million this year for water. Most of it's CAP water. Our budget, to put it into context, our operating budget this year for water resources is about $132 million. So $20 million is just buying the raw water, not even treating it and distributing it to customers. And about 1/4, just to add on to that, about 1/4 of the budget is our salaries, is staff. So most of it is commodities, electricity, chemicals, our obligations with the ownership and the plants we have with the city of Phoenix. So it's just kind of a high-level overview of how it breaks down and where costs are going.
Just to be clear, we are treating it before we're sending it to customers, though.
We try to.
Yeah, okay. There's a little sentence in there that got me laughing.
Thank you, Chris. I asked staff to do a 2.5% analysis. You know, we have the 3.5, we have the 2.5, and one of the things I thought is about parity and bringing kind of a closure, whether we're at 3.5 or 2.5, and that parity does happen at the 2.5 level as well as the 3.5 level. But in my personal opinion, I know that we have more residential water users than, what do we have? You said 88,000?
Well, it's 93% is residential in
93%
some
of the
form.
154. It's quite a few.
Yeah.
But, holding rates down to a minimum was my thought process. And council, we need some consensus on which direction to go on Monday. And personally, I want to move with the 2.5% parity based on the analysis. And that allows us to move forward in 27, 28, getting a little closer to instead of a 3-year mark. And eventually, the commercial and industrial users are going to be paying a higher rate regardless, and we're just moving it up by 1 year. So, council, I need a consensus on where you want to be, 2.5 to 3.5, so staff can make the presentation on Monday and for the ordinance change. So I've heard Ms. Duff at 3.5. Is that correct?
It's just a 3.5? Is that the original?
The original one.
3.5, yes.
So just so I'm reading this right, so you're saying 2.5%, Mayor, because that gets us more to the balance of.
On the parity that you brought up in audit and finance, actually.
But it gets us the same, we get to parity at the same time, but it actually gets closer to actual use, percentage uses, faster.
Correct.
Am I reading that right, Brian?
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, yes. So if we did the 2.5%, yes, right now it calculates to about 49% residential, non-residential 51. And if we did the recommended, it's at a 50-50. The consumption for residential is at 48. What we're calculating now in non-residential is 52. So yeah, it's roughly the same, just 1% off.
But the commercial will go from 13% to 20%, is that correct?
Yes.
So commercial general, if the 3.5% would be a combined rate of 7.4%, and then the 2.5 would be 11.8% of a combined for service charge and usage charge. So what that would look like is for the 2.5%, commercial usage, the commercial service charge would go from 4.5% to 7.5%. And then commercial usage, I believe, if I remember correctly, was 13% in the original. Now it'd go up to 20%. Commercial commercial landscape would go from 20% to 25%. And then the large commercial would go up to 25% also, if we did the 2.5 from the original 3.5.
So, Mr. Adams, I'll start with you first. You're the furthest away.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I think that, my intention on being one of the catalysts to this discussion and this relook at the proposal that initially came to us was to reduce the burden primarily on residential ratepayers. I don't think anything, we've, incremental steps has been a theme this morning, and I think that it would be a logical incremental step. We can't change the direction immediately without a good deal of further study, but I think it's a good first step to say we've considered an alternative which reduces the original proposal for the residential payer. I've had some conversations with the business community, and the ones I've had, I don't by any means suggest I represent anyone or have the best finger on the pulse, but folks I have talked to seem to understand the issue of parity. And given the choices between the presentation that we saw last week, the 2.5% with some of the burden being pushed down to commercial, and 0, I think that there's, again, the folks I've spoken to, there's an understanding that 2.5 might be a good compromise. So at this point, I would lean in that direction. This is Thursday, it's not Monday, but I've always got my ears open and willing to talk to people and take additional information. Thank you.
So Mayor, I did just want to clarify Councilmember Adams' final point right there. We do need to understand direction from council today on which option they would like to appear on the agenda on Monday, so that the documents for Monday reflect which direction they would want to go. So Councilmember Adams,
Mr. Adamson, you're okay with 2.5 for now?
Well, isn't that akin to taking a vote today?
We're not taking a vote today. We want a consensus.
Yeah, it's
just direction for staff to place it on the agenda.
No, I can live with 2.5.
I'd also like to make sure that council saw the letter from the Mesa Chamber of Commerce and take that into consideration, since it's representing a large division, a large amount of our businesses.
Who wants to go next? Who's a volunteer?
I'll go. I have not talked to some of the business owners, so I take comfort that Councilmember Adams, that you have, and that between the two, the 2.5% is a good compromise, because again, we don't want to radically impact and in a negative way our businesses. I'm very sensitive to that fact, but I think the 2.5% is clearly less burdensome when looked at and compared to the 0%. So I think that's a good compromise that I can live with as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Heredia or Mr. Summers?
Yeah,
I two are up.
My preference is to keep it at 3.5. It states, we get to parity at the same time with commercial, and it's less burdensome on commercial. Still a higher rate that we're adding at 13%, right? I think that makes it again an incremental piece, but if we do 2.5, I think you see the balloon into 20% in additional with the usage charge, right? Okay. So my preference is 3.5. It's base rate on inflation, right? As far as we're looking at costs, eggs cost more. Milk, gas is more, and so it's part of the. I think what we, as good stewards, we have to look at making sure that we are looking at how we pay for this work, and then with the look out at all, including residents and business owners that are in the city of Mesa. But so that would be my preference, is 3.5, keeping it there with still a considerable use, a charge on commercial at 13%, but that's my opinion right there.
Thank you, Mr. Heredia. Mr. Adams, go to you next, and then we'll go to the swing vote here to my right.
Thank you, Mayor. The Chamber of Commerce's letter was referenced a few minutes ago, and I'd like to point something out there. Maybe 4 or 5 paragraphs down, the letter states, accordingly, the Mesa Chamber of Commerce respectfully urges the rejection of any proposals that would concentrate the entire rate adjustment burden on the Mesa business sector. It doesn't say any. It says the entire. And you can read what you want into that, but I read the letter very carefully when I received it, and I don't see it as being a fist on the table saying nothing would be warranted. It says the entire rate adjustment, and that would be what the 0 residential was. The 2%, the 2.5 rather, is a compromise between the two. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
I won't hold us in suspense. I'll be all right with it, 2.5, but I'll say this. No one's really advocated for the 0. And, with all that's going on with all other communities, I think the smart approach that this city has taken to ensuring that we have investment in our infrastructure, that we are securing our water rights as inexpensively as possible in an environment that makes it very difficult when you see the investment going on in other communities and how much they've had to increase it. To celebrate that, to allow our residential ratepayers who buy the milk, who buy the groceries, the meat that's going up, frickin' pasta's going up now. To be able to give them a zero, I think would be, pardon the pun, a big splash. My concern is moving forward, again, there are unintended consequences moving forward to that. We've already heard it. Some of those costs get passed on. And I don't want to make a big splash if these numbers don't add up for whatever reason in the future. And we find ourselves, I do not want a 25% increase in the future because we didn't smartly take this on. I feel comfortable that at least a 2.5% will keep us in that ballpark so that we don't see those big increases. And it is a balance because we are trying to attract more quality retail. So what's the correct balance for there? Because how are you going to get those small mom and pop shops if we overburden them? We have a lot of industrial, 9 million square feet of spec industrial still sits vacant. I don't want to knock that off too fast either. But I do feel that the balance having shifted to the commercial industrial user, I think our residents deserve to have a piece of that. And a 2.5 is a pretty decent compromise just to have just a small 2.5% increase. When other cities are seeing double digits, I think that's a pretty big win, especially considering your original proposal, I think was what, 6?
It was 5.5%.
Yeah,
Mayor,
5.5.
Vice Mayor.
So I think we'll take a win and not go too far. Is that 4?
Yeah, very good. You have your direction. Thank you. Thank you for all those comments.
So Mayor, real quick, one last slide.
Oh, now you're showing us one last. After all that.
After all that. But what I wanted to do, so since we are doing that, the commercial now, the recommended, so what we'll do is adopt for commercial the notice of intent because we can't go above what we noticed in the intent to adjust rates. So what we would do is the city would take action on the notice of intent for the remaining non-residential. So anything above what we presented in the notice of intent, we would then introduce and then come back in January for the introduction of those rest of the percentages. And then in February, council would take action on that. And then April is when the additional increase over what was previously noticed, that's when those would take into effect. So the original, what we're doing on Monday is introducing a lower residential, but up to for commercial. And then council would take action on December 1 for those rates. And then coming back, we would notice the rest of the percentage increase on December 8th. And then council would vote later next year for that additional to go into effect. So it will be 2 effective dates. So Mondays and December 1st's effective date will be January for the residential and part of the commercial. And then the effective date for the rest of the non-residential would be April 1st.
Any questions? All right, thank you. That was a fluid discussion, I guess.
You want to plow through or take a 5-minute break?
Why don't we take a break while we get geared up for the
Thank you.
battery energy storage systems?
Yeah, because what could possibly go wrong there?
Maybe a fire. Okay, well, we have everybody back. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Is Rich back?
Mr. Adams, you're still with us? We'll find him. 2B is a presentation on.
I'm here.
Couldn't find a mute
Thank you,
button.
voice. Presentation on the regulation of battery energy storage systems, including potential amendments to the building, fire, and zoning regulations of the City of Mesa Code. Rachel, it's just you?
Just me. I have lots of backup, though.
So the questions start.
So,
That's right.
so they're in staging, right?
They
That's
are.
what we call on the fires.
They're in
staged.
waiting.
Okay.
Well, good morning, Mayor, council members. We've been continuing to work on the battery energy storage system, or the BESS text amendments, and so we just wanted to give you a brief update on those. So just as a reminder, both Planning Division, Building Division, and our Fire Department has been working on amendments to both our zoning ordinance and to our fire code related to BESS. We've had 2 public open houses in October, and we recently went to the Planning and Zoning Board on October 22nd to get their recommendation. What we've been hearing throughout the whole engagement process and through the public hearings have been kind of questions regarding the separation that we've been proposing, the definition of the accessory use of BESS versus the primary use, questions and comments about the screening and the design of the facilities, questions about the required sound studies and what the minimum decibel levels of that can be, and then comments about safety, including requirements of the fire code, and then finally just how this applies to certain communities such as Eastmark. So when we did come through City Council for a study session on October 6th and presented the proposed amendments, and we went to the Planning and Zoning Board on the 22nd, and we did receive a recommendation to City Council for adoption, but they had 2 suggested changes to the ordinance. And those were a change to the separation requirements that was proposed. So the ordinance that staff brought forward proposed a 1,000-foot separation from the nearest residential use or zoning district. And P&Z's recommendation was to reduce that to 400 feet. And the other recommended change that the board made was to the nameplate capacity for what qualifies as an accessory use for BESS. Staff's proposed ordinance suggested that that be 1 megawatt for an accessory use, and the Planning and Zoning Board recommended that we change that and increase it to 5 megawatts. And so what we're going to be bringing forward on December 1st is 2 different ordinances for your consideration. So for introduction on the 1st. One of those being the recommendations from the Planning and Zoning Board. So one for the increase of the separation from residential uses and zoning from 1,000 feet down to 400 feet. And then the second being their increase in the accessory use nameplate capacity from 1 megawatt to 5 megawatts. But then we are also bringing forward a second option for City Council to consider, and that would be staff's recommendation. And the difference in these 2 ordinances would be the separation requirement from residential uses, which staff recommends remain at 1,000 feet. But we are making a change or an update to that ordinance to the accessory use nameplate capacity, so that would increase to the 5 megawatts as well.
Mayor.
Yes. Were you done, Rachel, with that?
Yes, it's pretty brief. We just wanted to give you an update on what you'll be seeing moving forward and what the impetus behind that was.
She was out of slides, I can tell you that.
Well, she didn't get to the questions one.
Yeah.
Yes, so I'm happy to take any questions.
So let me ask this. We just gave staff direction on what to do with utility rates to have that introduced. Why are we introducing 2 separate ordinances instead of just getting direction on which way we want to head?
And we could. Mayor, Vice Mayor, the distinction was that we're not taking any action on this till December 1st. We didn't want to preclude any other discussion that council may want to have, unlike the utility rate introduction, which would happen on Monday, and that we needed to publish all that around it. So we would love it. If there's a consensus of the council today to move forward with one, glad to do that. But that was in order just, normally we would do this a little bit later in the process, but with Thanksgiving and with National League of Cities and not being able to meet for the next couple of weeks, the idea was to give both options to council and then allow that extra time for discussion and then on December 1st, there would be a motion with 4 or more votes for one of the two options, and that would be the one to move forward. So, Vice Mayor, that was the rationale behind it.
I won't say that it's unprecedented. I think we've done this before, but I do find it a little unusual. Because I'll tell you, this impacts my district and pretty much my district alone at this point, given the proposals that are before us. And I haven't fought a best fire, but I have fought battery fires. And I understand the difference in chemistries, but I think our public safety absolutely has to come first. And I will strongly advocate that 1,000 feet is not an unreasonable ask to ensure the public safety, and particularly when a home is somebody's number one large investment. And the idea of the smoke and the particles and the hydrogen fluoride that flows out of these things when they catch fire can contaminate. That 1,000 feet can make a huge difference in the health and safety and welfare of our public. It is not unprecedented. I understand that, that jurisdictions can set whatever standards they want. The NFPA is a minimum standard for safety, right? And UA does a great job. There's still a lot of unknowns. This is a new technology. Rancho Cucamonga has done 1,000 feet. A California bill that was introduced wanted to do 3,200 feet, but that was for 200 megawatts or more. I don't think we have anything that large, do we? Actually, we do. So I take that back. 200 megawatts or more, 3,200 feet. Bill in California, and some of these are even larger. 5,000 feet in Alameda County. The standards, I don't think 1,000 feet is an unreasonable standard given what a lot of these other communities are doing. If it's the decision of council that they want to at least have the option, because I will admit, we don't have a lot of the background included in this. The entire ordinance and background material is not in this, but 1,000 feet is a reasonable number given what some other communities are doing, and just erring on the side of caution. So with that, I'm just interested in council's conversation.
Mayor, I'd like to know, where did they get the 400 feet? What was that based on?
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth. So 400 feet was an early recommendation that staff had, and that was based on the data center ordinance and the minimum separation that we have for data centers. We thought that was a reasonable distance considering the impacts of data centers, not including the safety issues such as BESS.
So they're basing it on the data centers? You're telling me that the
They're
separation?
basing it on an earlier version of the ordinance that they wanted us to revert back to that recommendation.
Not based on public safety concerns?
Correct.
Interesting. Okay.
So how did we get from 400 to 1,000? What was the change? Why did staff start with 400? I understand you just explained that. But then the recommendation was 1,000. You changed it.
Mayor,
right?
council member, we were asked to look at a greater distance to really consider the safety impacts of that. And as Councilmember Summers was kind of alluding to when he was quoting some of those distances from other municipalities, there really is no set standard for BESS and separation because it is a newer technology. And those distances that we've seen in ordinances from across the country are anywhere from 100 feet up to, 5,000 feet. So we felt like that was a good middle ground, reasonable 1,000 feet from residential that we would bring forward.
So you went to 1,000 feet because council felt that was a good number, basically.
I believe, Mary, do you want to?
Yeah, so Mayor, Councilmember Duff, what we did was, again, because there is no standard except for the NFPA, which is, it's small, it's like 100 or 150 feet, and we knew we wanted to go further than that. What we heard from some residents, what we heard through some of our outreach, what we heard in our workshop with our study session here with council was that maybe we wanted to consider a greater distance, and that's why we went from the 400 to the 1,000. So it was a series of comments that we were hearing about that separation. at 400.
Have we sought the people who are experts in this, because it's a evolving technology that is changing quickly as far as the safety, whatever. Have we talked to any experts in this field as far as what, the recommendations would be?
So Mayor, Councilmember Duff, I'm going to ask maybe if our Fire Marshal, Sean Alexander, and our building official, John Sheffer, will come up. We have done a lot of outreach on this. And as I said, the standard really is the NFPA, which is the 100 feet, which we, as staff, thought we should go at least a minimum of the 400 feet, because that's what we had for data centers, because it's more than just the safety. There's the noise impacts and the visual impacts and all of those things. So with the 1,000 feet, we're taking that precaution for those potential safety impacts. But I can let Sean and John speak to some of the people that we've done outreach to, because we have done a lot of outreach to the experts on this topic.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. So we have spoken to quite a few experts in this industry, and to the comments that have already been made, there is no set standard. We have taken our proposed draft language and run it by some independent subject matter experts that we trust at agencies like Underwriters Laboratories and FSRI, the Fire Service Research Institute, to get their input. And the best we could get from them was that our zoning ordinance was in the right ballpark. They were unwilling to give us exact numbers because it is dependent on the needs of each jurisdiction. As Mary pointed out, the NFPA and the fire code standards have a minimum setback requirement of 100 feet. So for us we're not able under the fire code to, unless we added more amendments, to increase that distance. That this was a zoning consideration. And we got to this point based on feedback that we got through the public outreach process.
Okay, great discussion. I knew you'd call in the staging crew here, those. Mr. Butler, did Maricopa County just set a distance for their best systems for the county? Do we know?
They did.
Sean, do you want? Okay.
They did. I don't recall the number off the top of my head.
It was, I believe it was 100. It was 100 feet.
100 feet.
That Maricopa County just approved in the last week or so. Is that
yes, sir.
Correct? Okay.
It was very recent.
But I think to Sean's point, I mean, that's the struggle, right? And it's one of the disadvantages, I guess, of being an early adopter on this, that we're actually ahead of most communities and trying to bring some regulatory framework to this, or a zoning framework to this, is the fact that the folks that have made decisions have been all over the board. And Councilmember Duff's right. I mean, it's certainly an evolving technology. I wouldn't want to say whatever council decides will be the final say on this, right? This may be an issue that comes back in a couple of years, depending on which way the industry and technology has gone on this, right? So we know that puts you all in a tough situation, because there's not that industry best practice that we can just point to and others. So that is why it is truly, people trying to do their best with this. And I know that's what Rachel and John and Sean and everyone who's had these conversations with industry, and yeah, we've, several of us I know have heard from different elements of industry, and it all depends on who you're talking to, right, on this. So that makes it a very challenging component. I think one of the things moving forward on this is where this land use will be allowed. And I think part of trying to get in front of the light industrial component of this, because we do have the 3 sites that have been the catalyst, for this discussion. In the future, certainly there are places in heavy industrial and maybe general industrial where best systems, I think, would be more compatible with the uses that we would like to see from a manufacturing standpoint and heavy industrial standpoint. I don't think anyone questions that these type of energy systems are essential to trying to solidify the grid. the traditional generation is just very complicated, right? And takes decades or more for energy companies to, power companies to generate. And these are a much shorter lead time in order to bring that on. And we've heard from the highest, echelons of SRP, the challenges that they see down the road as far as just meeting the energy demands in this valley and particularly in Southeast Mesa. We're a victim of our own success, right? Which is great because as alluded to in the rates, we're now, that shift that we're seeing, that balance, that more economic growth that we've experienced and the booming economy in Southeast Mesa also has the side effect too, right, of the high energy demand and exactly the types of people that we're making Jay go out and recruit day in and day out, advanced manufacturers, others. Guess what? They use a lot of energy. So there's no easy answer to this. And I know you're being faced with the dilemma of balancing the public safety aspect of this along with the legitimate energy demands that our utilities need in order to go forward, and it's an evolving industry, which makes it even harder. So that is the policy dilemma that the city's faced with right now in this regulation. Exactly. So
I can't wait for that first zoning code that comes through in Maricopa County, and they want to put a BESS system 100 feet away from homes. That's going to be an interesting one to watch. I just watched the whole one with BNSF. That's not a BESS system, that's a train system. It's different, I understand. But we've talked repeatedly on this council about the conflict between industrial uses and residential uses. And we want to make sure that we have good transitions that go between those very, very different sides of our spectrum. I want industry, I agree with you. I think the BESS systems are at least a bridge right now between the lack of increasing generation capacity that we need in this state and the fact that we want to bring in advanced manufacturing jobs and we need that energy. But there has to be a compromise here. And I think 100 feet from somebody's home is absolutely insane. Those firefighters got blown back. It would have been 100 feet if it weren't for that dang chain link fence.
That is correct.
So to put that kind of an explosive potential, and I know there are new safety systems that are built into these, but they're active and they can fail. And to put that type of hazard so close to someone's house, I think there's a dereliction of duty. I'm just going to say it. I think 1,000 feet is reasonable given what a lot of other folks are doing. And again, I will stand up for my residents on this. I'm completely in agreement I'm willing to house these systems with some reasonable accommodation for the safety and welfare of my constituents, period, knowing that we need the system. But I can't compromise on people's safety for that. We're going to have to figure something out. But there are 6 other council members, and we need 4 of them to make a decision on which way to go forward. So I guess the question is, do you want to continue moving forward with the 2, or do we want to try to get consensus today so that I can rest easy knowing what my vote will be in December?
If this ordinance of 1,000 feet was employed to the best systems that we have in process right now, or is it 3? Is it 3? If this 1,000 feet was applied to those 3, what would that look like? Would they be able to have a system there? Would it prohibit them? What are the complications with that 1,000 feet based on the 3 projects we have?
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Duff. So it would just be the 2 projects that have not been constructed because the one is under construction already. So they would have to modify the site plans that they presented to staff previously, but it's my understanding that they would be able to make modifications to meet those requirements.
But I think the capacity in one would be reduced based on the 1,000 feet.
Mayor, I'm not sure if I can speak to that. Mary, do you know if that's correct?
Mayor, councils,
The
we're not,
energy stories are, yes.
we're not 100% sure yet because we don't know specifically how they would configure that layout. So I know we've been having some meetings with both of the applicants if it does go up to 1,000 and how that impacts their site. But I
Right.
don't have a specific answer for you on that right now.
But you will get one.
Mayor, we can get one.
Nana's coming with
Nana may have one.
Well, I was waiting for Assistant Chief
Amaya?
Burgett to come up.
Hi, Mayor, Councilmember Duff. Mayor Freeman and I actually met with one of the companies doing 2 of the sites, and they confirmed that if we go with 1,000 feet, they are able to meet that requirement. We haven't talked to the 3rd one yet, and I think we have a meeting this afternoon with the 3rd one.
And I think the third one would either have to reduce capacity or the problem with that one is there is a proposed apartment development that would be 400 feet away from this thing. So we're putting residents in harm's way. And just to end on a positive note, Tesla is a supplier of a lot of these BESS systems. They have just recalled battery systems for their Powerwall due to a fire and hazard risk.
So don't put one in your garage.
Don't put one in your garage.
That's what it's telling you.
They're the same batteries, they're very similar. Chemistry.
Well,
Ms. Goforth?
I'm going to let you guys duke this out, but before that, I'll just add one comment.
It's just a fireman thing.
I don't.
I'm certainly not one to support anything overly burdensome rules and regulations, but I have to agree with Scott on this, that when it comes to people's homes and their safety, this is an unknown area, as we've said. I'd rather get it wrong and have it too far than get it wrong and not have it far enough. So that's where I am.
Okay. Mr. Adams, did you want to weigh in or wait till the next?
Yes.
Next
No,
round.
no, this is fine. I do have a few questions and a couple of comments. I'll start by just saying, I am not a professional firefighter, and we have the benefit of having 2 of those on our council and one sitting at the opposite side of the table, among others. So I'm going to strongly defer to what our professional firefighters' experience tells us. So with that said, Ms. Phillips, isn't it true that when you say 1,000 or 400, there isn't actually an additional 100 feet? Because isn't that measured from the fence line and then the actual batteries have to be 100 feet back from the fence line? Is that true?
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, so you're correct. So what we're talking about right now is a separation, and that is different from the setback that's being proposed in the fire code. So in the fire code, that setback is from the property line to the BESS equipment. And I want to see if actually I have a backup slide here with the diagram, if it's in here. It's not in this one, but I will have it for council that kind of shows the difference between the 2. So the setback for the fire code is from the property line to that BESS equipment. For the separation within the zoning ordinance, that's going to be a separation from the site screening wall of the BESS facility to either the use or a building in context of industrial uses. But that's different. So that's going outwards from the site, whereas the setback is going into the site in kind of most simple terms.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm that. At some point in the recent past, when discussing this issue, we had talked about requiring I'll call it a demolition bond. So let's say we stand up, or one of these companies stands up a BESS facility, and 20 years from now, it's either obsolete or no longer required or otherwise no longer viable. Yet the company that built it is long gone. Are we requiring some type of a bond to be placed that will take care of the remaining batteries or other stand-down type of activities that might occur in that case?
So, Mayor, Councilmember Adams, aside from these zoning amendments, we're also looking at adopting the 2024 fire code. That code has provisions for decommissioning, and requires a decommissioning plan be sent to the city for approval. And the fire code official has the ability to ask for some kind of financial assurance, what's their plan in their decommissioning plan? How are they intending to pay? We could insist on a bond. We could also add other language to the code later if we feel that's necessary.
Okay, thank you. I think that might be something we would strongly want to consider. Ms. Phillips, this went to P&Z. How many P&Z members were present on the dais when this was decided? Do you know?
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, there were 4 P&Z members present, so that was a 4-0 vote with these recommended changes. Oh, 3-1, I apologize.
I'm sorry?
Mary corrected me. She said it was a 3-1 vote.
So as we've seen, I'm sorry, please go on.
No, I was just trying to confirm. So it was 4 members that were present.
Okay, so as in past situations, we didn't enjoy the benefit of 3 other P&Z members' opinions. What things did P&Z consider, if you could summarize, that caused them to feel that the 400 recommendation was more appropriate than the 1,000? Can you summarize that? I realize I could go back and read the minutes. That's on me. I'm sorry I didn't do that, but maybe just a quick summary.
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, I think a lot of that had to do with the public comment that we received at the hearing through just the public outreach process and comments from the industry saying that the city should be following the NFPA and that they felt that 1,000 feet was excessive. So largely it was based on those comments.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I would ask here for our deliberation, is there a place here for a compromise? We're talking 400, we're talking 1,000. Is there somewhere in the middle, considering that extra 100 feet as well, is there somewhere in the middle that would be a reasonable compromise that this council would want to consider? I am all in with the Vice Mayor's comments about public safety. I don't want to compromise that in any way, but I'm wondering, since this is such uncharted ground, is there some compromise on distance here that we would feel comfortable with from both the public safety standpoint and doing our best to be accommodating to industry? I just throw that out. And my number is probably different than anybody else's, but if that's worthy of a conversation, I just throw that out there for discussion.
Mr. Adams, why don't we do this? I think, Mary and Nana, you're meeting with the third or the second battery system people today, and you can get some information from them and come back to us and see what perhaps their distance would be. And we can go from there. But does that help you, Mr. Adams?
Yeah, fair enough. I just, if I had to indicate my preference today, I would be alongside the Vice Mayor. I think the safety aspects should trump all other issues here, but I'd be happy to hear additional data. I think the struggle I have here is I like to make data-based decisions, and this sounds like the data is all over the place, which makes it doubly difficult. But thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. I get it, and the problem is it's an emerging technology. That's what makes it so difficult, and that's why these numbers are all over the place too. There's 100 feet from the county, Jiminy Crickets, and 5,000 feet in another county, and I think the 1,000 feet to me makes the most sense, and I think there's some land use choices that could be made on the second property or third, depending on how you look at it, that might make that a more viable decision with better uses. So that's my signal.
Well, I'll just add some comments that, we can never plan for an incident. If a battery storage catches fire, I know our public safety personnel will handle it appropriately, regardless of the distance, right? I mean, Chief Brigade, we're prepared to do that. Even in the emergency response guide that we get for fire personnel, it's a minimum of 330 feet evacuation from any incident. So that's what we do, is we'd evacuate 330 feet at a minimum and then expand it from there if we need it. And then we have all the technology to determine, smoke plumes, water runoff, contamination issues. But, we're dealing with 3 sites and 2 contractors to build battery energy storage systems. And I would like to see some type of compromise. I understand the 1,000 feet, but probably some of our highest levels of toxicity can come from a house structure fire, what's in a house. And usually these containers will burn, what I understand, inside and stay inside with a minimal amount of smoke. Fire Marshal, do you want to add to that? I mean, how's it been burning, those storage containers?
If it does breach the storage container, then you're going to have a large exterior outside fire. We've seen some pictures from best fires across the country where they put out a significant amount of smoke once they breach that container. As we've discussed in previous discussions, our tactics for fighting a best fire are to actually let the container that is involved burn itself out and protect the fire from spreading to the surrounding containers around that. It's not part of this discussion with the zoning code setback distances, but I would like to remind council that one of the amendments that we made to the fire code to address the risk on these sites is to break up these properties into arrays no greater than 300 by 300 feet, so that if there were to be a container fire that were to spread from one to the other, that it would be contained to a smaller group rather than run through the entire premise. So we have put in some additional requirements in the fire code amendments to try and address the risk and the operational response to a best fire.
Okay. So I'm really hearing consensus that we continue this, till, and unless the council wants to, Mr. Reddy, I mean, any thoughts? So I'm hearing Mr. Adams, myself, 2 for maybe 2 or 3 this way.
So Mayor, why don't we do this?
And we don't have Ms. Taylor.
Exactly,
here
so we'll,
as well.
certainly, with the discussion that'll happen with Site 3, that might shed some light on it. We'll keep both options on the table, not to complicate things. Maybe there is a third option after speaking with the applicant. To Councilmember Adams' point, why don't we get some clarity on that? I'm not saying there would be, but we could bring forward a third option if need be in the future based off of that conversation as well. We've got 2.5 weeks before this is, will be coming to council, so that could give us some time to try to understand a little bit more about those dynamics, since there's, I don't think, clear direction today on which way to go, and then Councilmember-elect Taylor can add her voice to this as well. So.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Adams. You okay with that?
Yes, that sounds fine, Mayor. And while I have the mic here, I am going to have to bow out here at 10 o'clock for another meeting commitment that I have.
Copy that. Thank you. Then if it's okay, council will move over to item 3 as the knowledge of receipts. Is there a motion for that? Thank you, Ms. Duff. Vice Mayor, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Next is current events and conferences attended. Council members, do you have anything you wish to share? Okay.
I'll share one. First of all, this has been a week for veterans, for all of my fellow veterans who serve. Thank you for your service. I don't know if you know this, but of the living Americans today, only roughly 6.1 million 6.1% of Americans have served in the military. 2.1 million women have served. My wife is proud to be one of those who served. So we had the opportunity to attend a number of events. I spoke at one of our Mesa Public Schools about service and the legacy of service in the military, not just the military, but being engaged in your community. The Veterans Medical Leadership Association, who does a lot of outreach to veterans in need, dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, homeless. They try to get in front of it. They had a gala and fundraiser that I was able to attend, which was outstanding. It turns out my wife and I were both there, and this older gentleman was sitting next to us, and we just broke into a conversation, and we're like, so who are you? And Colonel Young was his name. Colonel Young turned out to be our last base commander when we were at Luke Air Force Base, and we just reminisced about all the incidents and the stuff that went on when we were at the base. It was a great conversation that we had. So, I got to drive the captain over here on our antique fire truck, and for Veterans Day, it was a great parade. And sorry for the lurching, but it is an old gas rig. So, thank you.
Ms. Duff?
I have quite a bit. It's been a busy week. Last Thursday, I attended a ribbon cutting and open house for Energy Solutions. They're right down here on Broadway near Extension or so. And they distribute high-quality solar energy solutions. I'm glad to have them here in District 4 along Broadway. That night, I also attended the Shade for All workshop at Sherwood Park, looking at trees and shade structures, engaging the neighborhood and how they can implement some of these things at their homes. It was held at the park, and of course, they've had a lot of trees there. Thank you to the Urban Nature Program, Stephen Adamson, and our Sustainability Department for putting that together. It was well attended. On Friday night, the mayor and Summers and Adams and I think Ms. Taylor was at the PD Academy class number 61 graduation. And their motto, Earned Not Given, is a great class. I think we got like 3 new women officers for Mesa, so yay. And that night I went to the Salvation Army Red Kettle Kickoff. There was actually, I didn't realize this until I kind of got there, there's a competition between City Council, Iowa City Council, all right, and fire. There was a table of them, and PD, I think they had 2 tables about who could run around the room as fast as possible and gain donations from each other, but given half the room was already competing, but I gave it my best. PD won, but they did get a $10,000 check from Step Up Schools. They have dissolved, and they used they're a nonprofit, and they gave their money to the Salvation Army and their needs. So I was very happy for that, and next year, watch out, I'll be prepared. Saturday was the Barbecue Classic. I was a judge at the Kids Queue, and the mayor was also there for quite a bit of it. He was also a judge at the Kids Queue. There were award...
Mr. Heredia, too.
Oh, yeah, we were well represented. And there were award categories for Best Barbecue. I know, she's looking like, you guys don't know barbecue because I'm from Kansas City. Councilmember Goforth. But there were also award categories for appetizers, desserts, and the kid concoctions, which are actually very, very good. Sunday, the mayor was there. I think that was just you and me for the Remembrance Day, the Royal Air Force Remembrance Day for the cadets killed during training at Falcon Field during World War II. And that evening there was a dinner in conjunction with a UK group that came over, descendants of the pilots that had trained at Falcon Field. They're called Falcon Field, the New Generation. And about a dozen of them had flown over for a week of activities. They were also in the Veterans Day Parade. And so I went with the city and the Veterans Day, then I ran back, and then I jumped onto theirs, and then I went through it. And by the way, the Veterans Day Parade was always very good and amazing. Monday night, we had the gratitude gathering. The mayor was there, and I, hosted by Together in Service. Our nonprofits and faith-based organizations come together to celebrate what they do. And the theme was the power of youth and service in our community. Remarkable presentations from our youth, very moving and inspiring. Special thanks to, I always mess up her friend, Dallin. I've got to know her very well, but to the point I don't say her name anymore, and now I screw it up. And when
Just
I do
say
say
Miss
it, Miss Bodine. I can say Bodine. Thank you to her for putting it together. She does a great job. And then yesterday, City Manager Scott Butler and I were at the Prudential Clean Room Services ribbon cutting in District 4 near Country Club and the US 60. They expanded their building to accommodate the growing technology of all the wear that you need for technology and healthcare, all the clean room wear. They clean it, and they've been in business for a long time, and they're planning to expand even further. Great jobs, really, and impressive benefits, and I'm glad to have them here in District 4. Thanks.
Wow, okay, you were busy.
Yeah.
Ms. Goforth?
I was out of town last weekend, so I missed a lot of events. I was really bummed to miss the barbecue, since I'm really the only one on this council that knows barbecue.
You can be a judge anytime. They need judges every year.
But I did enjoy participating in the Veterans Day Parade. I have a lot of veterans in my family, my father being one who served in the Air Force for 28 years. So I enjoyed being in that. So anyway.
Great, thank you. Mr. Reddy, anything? A lot of them were checked here, but we had our Lehigh annual meeting that Councilmember Adams and I both attended last Thursday. There was a delegation for autonomous vehicles from out-of-state senators and representatives from Washington State, Illinois, Virginia, and actually Montana. And Ian Linson was my co-host on that. So Ian did an awesome job about talking about autonomy vehicles, and we have Waymo here, and so they actually rode in Waymo a couple of times. They were impressed, but then I learned Montana probably couldn't accept autonomous vehicles, but they were here. Went to the Mesa Country Club. They had a grand reopening over there, and then the Arts and Service preview was also Sunday as well. So with that, all of us have had a busy schedule. What did you miss?
Well, I didn't necessarily miss one, but in the spirit of items, future meetings and conferences attended, I want to bring up, so the Gateway Library in Southeast Mesa will be opening December 6th. But in the next 3 weeks, every weekend, they're going to do a special event on the grounds. It won't be indoors, but it'll be on the grounds. So on this Saturday, November 15th from 9 to noon, the Arizona Museum of Natural History's Mobile Education and Discovery will be on site. It'll be science and technology, and if there isn't a dinosaur there, I'd be very disappointed. And they will also be signing you up for library cards. So that is the first event in the slow rollout of the grand opening of our first library in 30 years? 30 years.
And I believe that mobile van's new when it just started up. Mm-hmm. All right, with that, can you schedule for future meetings there, Mr. Butler?
Well, I appreciate the help of the Vice Mayor, so I don't have to speak to the countdown to Gateway. I know he's very excited about that, along with his neighbors, so looking forward to that on Saturday. But Mayor and Council will be back here on Monday. We'll start at 4:30 p.m. We'll convene in the upper chambers for the special council meeting and swearing in of Councilmember-elect Taylor. So we're looking forward to that at 4:30 p.m. on Monday. Following that, we'll come back downstairs for the study session at 5 p.m. and then back upstairs where you're getting your steps in. And so make sure your Apple Watch gets it. But we'll be back at 5:45 for our regular council meeting on Monday evening. And then, Mayor, just a reminder, no study session on the 20th or the 27th, and enjoy Thanksgiving with your family on that day. And so we'll be back following Monday. We'll be back on Monday, December 1st, for the first of two council meetings in December. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, item 6 is to convene an executive session for our annual review of council-appointed positions. There is a motion to go to. All right, thank you, Mr. Redia. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, we'll take a few minutes and we'll go behind us.